Thanks, Alistair. My name is Trewinnard. I'm the program manager at CheckDesk. We are an open source toolkit and training resources for collaboration around verification and digital news gathering. We work with a bunch of newsroom partners and universities in the Middle East and Europe. And we've heard from Kim and Fergus today a little bit about the potential value of community as sources and our responsibility towards them as newsrooms. What I'd like to do today is to make the case that if we're serious about putting community first, then we should really think about how transparency and showing some of the work that goes on behind the scenes of the reporting process could be a really valuable approach. So I'm going to try and think about two questions today. Firstly, why is it important to show the work? And then we're going to think through a little bit of how to show the work. In answering the first question, I think there's a really straightforward answer to this. Why show the work? Well, fundamentally, it's if you show some of the work that's going on behind the scenes, if you lift the lid on the reporting process a little bit, then your community is going to understand better what you do. It's going to understand better the context of the media and the eyewitness media that you're using. And I think that's especially important when we think about UGC, which is still a fairly new content type for audiences. And so this is a really famous example of verification gone wrong. This is from 2012. It's an old example. This is not a photo from Syria, but it's from Iraq. But it has something that makes it very ordinary with a lot of UGC, which is it has this, this caveat, this image which cannot be independently verified. And we see this all the time with UGC and eyewitness media. This video can't be independently verified. This tweet can't be independently verified. And I want to think about that from the audience's perspective. What does this add to the audience? Does it help them understand better what's going on? Or for me, it leads to more unanswered questions. Is the BBC 95% sure that this is a real photo? Or are they 60% sure? There's a big gap between those. And although that caveat creates a little bit of doubt, it doesn't make it clear to me why is this photo been used. This caveat is not really there for the audience's benefit. It's there to kind of protect the journalist in case there's a mistake. The BBC actually did a great job of explaining what went on and apologizing for this. I'd encourage people to check that out. But there's lots of these kind of caveats. This is from a talk that Andy Carving gave, actually, about language and evidentiality. And I think some of these are more useful and better than others. I don't want to speculate, but is obviously a kind of plagues network news on TV. But there is potential value in combining some of these. Multiple independent sources, for example, shows the audience that one of the techniques that we're using to verify this kind of stuff is to corroborate and to triangulate with different people who are saying the same thing. A great example of this is the New York Times Watching Syria's War column, which I think is sadly out of date now, but it provides a good example of how this approach can work. Here there's a lot of information about a given video and a given event, and it's framed around what we know and what we don't know. I think it's really rare that journalists and newsrooms typically list to their audience the things that they don't know, but I think there's a real power there. Here, the reporters use the caveat, we can't independently verify. But instead of leaving it there, they've actually explained why that's the case. What is it that we don't know about this video that leads me to say that we can't independently verify? In this case, it's because there's no other videos that show the same thing, and they can't identify the source. That, in and of itself, helps the audience understand a little bit better about what's going on. I think Kim raised the point that part of our role as journalists is to help audience understanding, help kind of literacy around these processes. Showing what we don't know is a really great way to do that. And additionally, I think it creates a really interesting opportunity for the people who are watching this. New York Times, in the same boat as AJ Plus, has a huge international audience that could potentially provide this information that's missing. So we can take away that caveat. We can say, potentially, there's somebody out there that might have a video that corroborates this. We could take away that caveat and we could increase the certainty. So why show the work? Promote community understanding, but also to create opportunities for engagement, and a powerful form of engagement, I think. So this is the kind of old model of publishing that I think came into the digital sphere from print, whereby the editorial staff works a lot before publication, and then the community has a very passive role post-publication. Consume, read, watch, share maybe. And what Meg Pickard, who's the former head of digital engagement at The Guardian, wanted to do was ask, what could we change this in the digital space? How can we improve this? And so this is one re-envisioning of that. And you can see right away that just by opening up and being clear about what might be needed, what a newsroom might need on a story, the verbs, the actions that can be taken by the audience are a lot more active. Instead of kind of passive, read, consume, react, we get commission, research, create, be a source, collaborate, contribute. These are much more active actions that can be taken, and they're much more journalistic actions, I think. In the age of distributed media and prolific distributed media like reportedly AJ+, we know that there's not really one moment of publication, but publishing is kind of an ongoing process that happens. And so I think when that happens, you can start to, we could start, and based on Reportedly's work and the Checkdesk partners' work and Storyful's Open Newsroom, for example, you could start to think of new actions that audiences can take to be involved in the process. So we could verify, we could translate, we could geolocate, we could identify. These are things that the audiences can and do want to engage with. I think there's something quite alluring about the idea of investigating it and getting involved in the reporting process. If newsrooms are open to showing some of the work, then audiences will get engaged. And so we see lots of examples of that. This is the Guardian's Accounted project is a great non-UGC related example. It's the way that the Guardian is tracking how many people have been killed by police in the US. And I wanted to point out this example because it's not a case of send us your snow pictures. This is a really fundamentally traumatic, it's a difficult topic. It's obviously a very prominent and timely topic. But I think that The Guardian has greatly benefited from the involvement of their audience and the involvement of their community in finding and building this really open data set of police killings. In the UGC space, we see people like Bellingcat pioneering this kind of show your work, community-driven approach. This is their Checkdesk. They use it as kind of a workbench for collaborative news gathering and verification. They're largely a volunteer-led organization with quite a small community, but they kind of put out a call. Here they're saying what it is that they're looking for, and their community will respond by finding all the examples, or as many examples as possible, of this is a case of Russian military vehicles in eastern Ukraine. There was obviously competing claims about what was going on in eastern Ukraine. Bellingcat wanted to investigate. And so they tried to pull in all of the sources that they could to see if they could build a case, see if they could add to the story here. So this is kind of collaborative news gathering, community-driven news gathering in action. Bellingcat then takes that a step further, and they actually investigate each of these assets in a kind of a very transparent way and in a way that involves the whole community. There's a couple of benefits to this. I think from when I show this in universities, it clearly shows the steps that are taken to verify a video. This is, at what point can we say this is verified? Well, there's quite a lot of information here, and there's 5 different people working on it. I think there's an additional benefit to showing your work in this way, which is that it gets more eyes on what's going on. And so it reduces the opportunities for errors, and it increases opportunities for people to add missing information. I think there's a lot of benefits to working this way, and it's really powerful. In this case, it was over, I think, a 4-week period. They gathered, just a small community, gathered over 400 reports, and they made a really solid case that, yes, there really was Russian military involvement in the parts of eastern Ukraine. And I think if Bellingcat, which is a small volunteer-led organization, can achieve this kind of impact, then imagine what bigger newsrooms could achieve if they engage with their millions of followers in this way. And so beyond thinking about why it's important to show the work, I also wanted to touch on how to show the work. And I think a caveat here is that I'm riffing a lot on the work of my colleague Chris Blow. He's the director of design at Meedan, and he's posted some really great long-form pieces on this. I think it's really important that, especially for distributed media, to be thoughtful about how we're showing the work and how we're showing the product of the work, because there's some powerful dynamics in play when it comes to social networks. typically is this dynamic, which is that fake information travels much further, much faster than any attempt to correct that information. This is the University of Indiana research comparing the tweets that link to a fake news post with the tweets correcting that post. You can see that there's a big gap there, and it's a real challenge. If misinformation spreads much farther and wider, that fundamentally undermines the credibility of the platforms that AJ Plus and reportedly are publishing on. That could potentially damage or have a negative impact on your credibility. And so I wanted to present some principles on this. And I think it's this part of the conversation is a lot about design, and I'd encourage AJ Plus and any newsrooms that are watching to really work with your design teams to think through some of these issues. This is from last week, and the principle is don't reshare the fake. What we saw last week was the photo of Mark Hughes that was being reshared hours and hours and hours after it was misidentified by well-intentioned people who were saying, this is not the right guy. This is kind of problematic because we know that humans have cognitive biases. One of these is the illusion of truth effect, which is that the more somebody's exposed to something, the more they see it or hear it, the more likely they are to believe that it's true, regardless of whether it's true or not. So for example, the idea that Vikings wore helmets with horns, that's absolutely not true, but we've heard it so much that if I asked any of you to draw a Viking, you almost certainly would put a helmet with horns, right? Napoleon wasn't that short. These are just things that we hear so often. And if we're not careful on the digital space, we really run the risk of recreating that effect. So a couple of examples of this. This is from the Weather Channel. They did a great blog post debunking a lot of fakes that commonly get shared. But they didn't mark up any of the images. They made this nice video. But if you watched this video and didn't have the audio, for example, or couldn't listen to it, then you would have no context for this to know that this is a fake. And the same goes for all the images in the post. And we see this time and time again. This is an example from a couple of years ago. And there's a couple of problems with this one. The first is that we know that online audiences are drawn to visual content. So some people will read the tweet and then see the image. A lot of people will just look at the image and won't take into account the context that's being provided here. Another problem is that on social media platforms, there are occasions where the media that you're sharing will be visible to audiences without the context that you're providing. So if you check your Twitter profile, for example, it shows the media in the sidebar, right? So in this case, this is imagine prominent fact-checking organization will have on its Twitter profile page something that it's debunking as media that it's shared. There's a big problem there, I think. The final problem is that we know from experience from working in digital news gathering and verification that people take this stuff and strip it of the context and reshare it all the time. It's one of the most common things that we can do. So in this case, this prominent fact-checking organization that's trying to debunk this claim is actually creating a lot of opportunities for people to reshare the fake information or to believe that this was a true image. This is another example of this. This one's even worse because the tweet up here, at least here we've got fake debunking is quite strong language. In this case, it's just satire. And so you'd have to really kind of focus in on what that tweet is saying to catch that this is not a real image. Happily, there's a really simple and better way to do this, which is to put really big, clear visual stamps on fakes or on real stuff. And so in this case, First Draft has applied a nice big fake stamp, and they've also juxtaposed it with the original image so the audience can see how this has been altered, and it can start to understand what are some of the ways that images and videos are altered. This approach can also apply to video. We're going to watch this because I really like the fake. Putting things side by side is a good way. Again, we've got the kind of big, clear labels. I think there's room for a lot of creativity in how this is applied to video, and I'd be really interested to see how a group like AJ Plus might work with that. This is an example from Hurricane Sandy. Again, a very big, clear visual stamp, but also some additional information, which is kind of low contrast. So, I mean, again, thinking from a design perspective, that's not the clearest text that you could have. maybe there's ways that you could treat that image in a different way that would be clearer for the audience. But in this case, this is really important context, because this is not really a fake image, right? This is a real image that was shared by the National Guard. It's only fake in the sense that it's being used out of context. And so what the team at The Atlantic have done here is provide that additional context. It's a real image, but it's being used in a way that is misleading. They provided a link which tells more of the story about what's going on. It explains the background. There's other ways that we can do this. I quite like this example. This is a really pretty well done image manipulation. And the way that I think this is a Snopes example actually, debunked it was to use a GIF overlay of the original. So you can start to see which part of the images are fake. And so you could imagine that if there were numerous parts, then you could expose some of the the truthful media, the original, in different ways. At Meedan, at Checkdesk, we've built a really simple prototype tool to help newsrooms and our partners do this kind of work. You can add a label, you can add a headline, you can drop in a link, you can put an overlay so you can fix some of the contrast issues that you encounter maybe. You can also make this bright green if you want. If you want to really flag that this is truthy media, then you can use colors in good ways. And so I think the second principle I just want to introduce is be creative. Creative content is shareable content. And remember, there's that powerful dynamic, that fake information spreads further and wider. So you need to be thinking about how can you make things that are designed, that are designed to kind of go viral. Chris refers to this as anti-viral media. Humor is not always appropriate, but obviously there's lots of levers that are available to designers. And I think in this space, there's a lot of great examples that we can see from the fact-checking community, where they've really invested in building brands and personality around explaining to the audience how true or false different claims and different pieces of media are. El Sabueso is probably my favorite. Even in this context, though, there's potential for things to get misleading. For example, we can see red, alert, false. But this one, when I first read it, I had to take a double glance because it's green, which in my mind and a lot of minds will say, good, go, it's all right. But actually it's saying it's false. So again, this is kind of a design consideration. And I think that sometimes there's, the examples I gave before are pretty prominent fact-checking organizations who do amazing work and have pioneered a lot of techniques, but how they're sharing stuff on social media is kind of a blind spot for them. So I just would encourage newsrooms to think about potential blind spots and ways that the imagery that you're sharing could be misconstrued, or how you could make it clearer. So these are a couple of design principles. Be clear, make things shareable, be contextual, which I think is to say that the same approach to debunks that works on Twitter probably isn't the same way that will work on Snapchat, for example. And I know that distributed agencies are really considerate about contextualizing content for different platforms. I think that also applies to debunks and verification work. And try and add some information for your audience. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Any questions? Please go back to him.
Yes.
When you're talking about, I think it's a very interesting thing, sharing your work and showing the steps. Are there any platforms that are being used for that, like tools?
I think Checkdesk is obviously one platform that we designed around this idea, but you can see some people will use Facebook groups pretty effectively, where to kind of share a piece of content and make a request. Storiful's Open Newsroom was in Google+, for example. So I think that there's simple ways that you can kind of find your community, and I think AJ+, your audience better than anyone else, and you can probably go to your community where it is. But yeah, I think Checkdesk is obviously something where we've tried to design for this case. Yeah. Any other platforms? I don't want to be only plugging Checkdesk.
Well, in terms of community groups, I've got a lot of Twitter lists. I generally try and just keep an eye on people, and also not only Twitter lists, but as in groups of people who are tweeting about this stuff regularly, but like keyword searches as well. Like Kim was talking about earlier, in terms of using TweetDeck around debunks and keeping an eye on what people are talking about. Snopes are great, Bliss Factor great. I think at Gizmodo, is it Factually? And Matt Novak?
Yeah, Factually, yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are really, unfortunately until the end of last year, it was Caitlin Dewey at the Washington Post. And really it's just getting kind of the conversation with them, similar to what I've been saying already. If this is something that you're really into, I guess just trying to talk to them about it. In a minute, I'm going to talk about some of the skills and techniques and tools and how to verify stuff, but before that, I think this is still a really important.
Yeah. I'd say the other example is, and I think it's sadly no longer with us, but Grasswire for a while had a really active Slack community. So they were using and kind of pioneering Slack as a way to interact with readers and try and kind of get input and get kind of valuable, productive engagement.
Any others? In terms of trying to, there was a bit of a balance there between the visual stuff and being more creative with it. Are there any formats apart from video and pictures which you might recommend or that you think work for trying to communicate the debunks and what is real and what isn't? Are there any interactive ways which?
I've not seen many, or I wouldn't say I've seen any real interactive examples of that. But I think there's potential for experimentation there. I think that I've also not really seen a lot of creative approaches to this in video. So I'd encourage video specialists to think about ways that video could be used to communicate this really effectively. Obviously, video has a kind of engagement that is kind of stronger than text and imagery. So I think that there's a lot of room for experimentation in this. And yeah, I would just try and keep in mind those warnings. Don't reshare fake content in a way that's going to harm your message or going to lead to people being confused about what's really happening.
Do you think there's more of like an incentive or a community or a drive from news organisations to be involved in this kind of debunking area than there was before? I mean, I don't think the amount of fake news and nonsense going around has decreased, but there seem to be more people involved. Why do you think that might be?
Yeah, I think that there's, from the groups that have really prioritized debunking, they've seen that people like that, it's a traffic driver basically. And so we see groups like the Observers who really prioritize debunking work, not that they're chasing clicks, they really care about making sure that misinformation the spread of misinformation is limited. But I think that there is a draw for audiences. People don't like to look stupid, right? So debunk posts are a good way of avoiding sharing fakes. I think the other piece of news that came out recently is that BuzzFeed are investing more and more in this, in kind of fake news debunking and kind of trying to limit the impact and spread of misinformation on the social web.
Excellent. If there's anything else? Cool. Thanks, Tom.